So you're kind of, there's a reissue of Out of the Gray, and I know the band was kind of in a period of transition at that point. So a few changes in labels and band members and all that. So what is your feeling about that record today, revisiting it?
Well, it's funny that was after a big period of change. You know, I mean, back then, everything was constant change because we were a new band starting out and was all bang, 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 you know, jam-packed action. We, after having done the first album, Days of Wine and Roses with Slash Records, and making that record really in one night and having it get so much attention after it came out, then signing with A&M and making that record over the course of 6 months,
right,
for a much higher budget, and having incredible, you know, wild adventures there, being on a major label, touring with REM across the US, our first European tour. There was a lot of exciting stimulus happening in our lives. And by the end of '84, after Medicine Show, after the tour with REM, after the European tour, after going to Japan, we pretty much fell apart.
Right.
The band, for all intents and purposes, broke up. We came back from Japan in December of '84, and just, you know, it just was not, just it wasn't a great feeling there. The guitarist Carl Procoda and I had pretty much stopped talking, and it just felt like a band about to fall apart and die.
Right.
And we did, and we came back home to LA, really not a band anymore. And a few months later, just like 3 months later, which again, when you're talking about being that young, 3 months is a long time.
Sure.
Nowadays, 3 months would be a blink of an eye. Back then, it was kind of like we broke up, we went to our respective corners, licked our respective wounds, and came out in a haze and started playing music again. Me and Dennis Duck and Mark Walton, drummer and bass player of the band, just for fun. And we kind of immediately said, hey, right, we like playing together. We like doing these songs. And we kind of slowly but very most assuredly became the Dream Syndicate again, and looked for a new guitarist. And we ended up finding Paul Cutler, who was a friend of the band, who was a local hero, and who had also engineered our first EP when the band started. It was a natural fit. And we started playing shows, and all of a sudden it went from being this kind of, you know, and this happens with a lot of bands, being a band that kind of was knocked sideways by the experience of being on a big label and having all the, you know, sometimes exciting, sometimes daunting things happening to us. We suddenly went back to our roots and became a band playing in the clubs and having fun. And Out of the Gray came out of that transition.
Right. Well, you mentioned playing in the clubs, and there's a lot of extra tracks on this package. And one of them is the show from Scorgies in Rochester, which where I'm from. So I saw you at Scorgies in '83. This is a couple of years later. What do you remember anything about that show?
Actually, I remember very little about the one you saw. I mean, that's when we were touring. I think it was the tour after touring with you too. Right. So I can kind of place where we were at that point. But the '85 one I do remember very vividly, in fact, because we were, once we reformed with Paul Cutler in the band, and we wanted to go out and immediately play with this new lineup and with some new songs we had, and get out, across the country. So we went to a lot of old familiar clubs we'd played before, places where we knew they'd be happy to have us. And one of them was Scorgies. And that night we played with the opening band, Absolute Gray.
Oh yeah.
Featuring Pat Thomas, we talked about before the interview.
Yeah.
And they were a band I knew because they'd covered my own Tell Me When It's Over, and kind of were a little bit of a local, fixture on the scene.
Yep.
And Pat and I, that was the kind of the night that Pat Thomas and I first really spoke at length and became friends. And we're still, to this day, very good friends. And Pat, in fact, is the person behind the Out of the Gray box set, who behind the reissue of Days of Wine and Roses, and as well, Pat is I don't know if you'd say, I guess he's on the staff of Fire Records, and he signed the Dream Syndicate for our new record. So Pat has become not only a great friend, but also sort of our facilitator, the guy who helps us kind of do our thing these days.
The thing is, we don't do any Dream Syndicate songs because Absolute Gray did them all already, and we thank them for that. Okay, this is a song called Out of the Gray. Yeah, you know about Raul? You're too hip for your own good.
He's also really a legend in his own right, because he wrote these very highly regarded books called Listen Whitey about the Black Panthers and the Black musical movement that went along with that, and also a book about Jerry Rubin as well. So he's this is Renaissance guy. So the thing I remember the night is that was really the night that I began a very important friendship in my life with him, and also what you said, it was the usual routine. You play Rochester, go to House of Guitars the next day.
You bet.
Yeah, what do you go? Eat the garbage plate the next door. A lot went along with Rochester, so it was kind of a night that I do remember. What I didn't necessarily remember though is that that particular show for us stood out in any way. But Pat years later said, I recorded that show that you guys played when we opened for you, and I still have the cassette. And dude, as Pat will say, dude, this thing is great. We should put this out. And he played it for me. I went, yeah, that's actually kind of how I remember a good night with that band sounding. And we decided to put it on this box set.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So when you went from playing these songs live the first time around, like at Scorgies, to making the record, what happened? How did you work it out to get to the point where it turned into this?
Well, we did that tour. We were out playing a lot of shows with the songs I'd written for the band around that time, and we were still at that point on A&M Records. Right. And it was it's easy to look at big labels and things didn't work out in a light of they're the enemy, they're the big ugly machine, and we're the young upstart band, whatever. They were actually really good to us. They were very encouraging. They really got behind Medicine Show. They paid the bills on what was a very expensive record, and I can't believe they even did that. And when that whole thing was all over, they wanted to do a new record with us. The problem was the one good thing was A&M on their lot, on their kind of little campus they had there in Hollywood. They had a really great recording studio, and we had free reign of to go in the studio and record demos and stuff like that, which we took advantage of because it was how to get to the next record, and also we liked recording the songs. And they were encouraging, saying, "Well, do some demos, and we'll eventually make a record." The problem was they just kept wanting to do more and more demos, and we were itching to. Hey, I was 25 years old at the time. I was still a kid, and I wanted to be out there making music and getting on the road. And in my mind, they were just slowing us down. And finally, one day after the third set of demos, and these demos, some of those demos are on the box set. Yep. But after the third set of demos, it to me sounded like they're ready to be recorded. I said, "Look, we can't do this anymore. We want to be we're an active band. We want to be out there playing shows, making records, doing our thing. Can you just let us go?" And they said, "Yeah." And the funny thing is, they not only very kindly let us go, but they actually, through various lawyers, gave us some money to go away. And the money they gave,
because you hear the opposite a lot of times,
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, they couldn't have been better. So it's like, okay, it wasn't a king's ransom, but what it was enough to make this album. So they gave us the money. We made Out of the Grave with that money, and very quickly found a new label, Big Time Records.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. Now, you mentioned the demos. They're all over this reissue. There's also a lot of covers and stuff, which, of course, I love. You got Neil Young and Alice Cooper and Cream. Yeah. The best, I think the most surprising one is you're covering Papa Was a Rolling Stone by The Temptations. So where did these come from? Is this just you guys goofing off in the studio playing your favorite tune?
Father's cried and said, Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, all he left was alone.
Yep, it is. What we decided to do going in, because we really, the four of us had a real kinship as far as music we loved, as far as playing music just to have fun. And we knew that it was in our kind of, nature to want to try covers, try different things, jam, whatever. And when we made that record, we told the engineer, Jim Hill, to run the two-track machine whenever we started playing, which we had some, if you're recording on 2-inch tape, it's expensive and also kind of cumbersome. But we said, hey, run this tape at the slowest speed and just replay it, record it. And so we came out of all this crazy stuff. And, when you're talking about these covers we did, it wasn't like, let's rehearse the perfect definitive version of Papa Was a Rolling Stone,
Right.
or Badge, or, all these other songs. We would just, usually at the end of the night after a beer or two say, well, let's just goof off. And to be honest, I never really felt those would come out in any way. It was just something we wanted to have for our own keepsake,
Sure.
or maybe for a fan club or for a flexi, that kind of thing. But again, Pat thought it was told part of the story to have this come out, which is why I smile when you said you like those, because to me,
Oh yeah.
in some ways, I cringe when I hear some of those. And believe me, we chose the cream of the crop. There are plenty that you'll never hear. But to be honest, I hear them. They're kind of fun, but they're really just there. I think I saw one review of the box set saying, well, the album and the remastering is fantastic, and the live show Scorgy is blistering, but their versions of these cover songs are not that great. Well, yeah, of course. It's there for the fans to have a laugh, and maybe a few of them kind of maybe given insight into the way we worked and the kind of ways we interpreted things.
Yep. Very good. Now, back in the day, you guys were part of something called, the
Paisley
Underground. And simultaneously here in New Zealand, there was the Flying Nun thing and the Chills and the Bats and all that, which kind of get linked together by some people. I'm wondering if you were even aware of what was going on down in New Zealand at the time.
Yeah, it's funny because, we would hear a lot about those bands, definitely the Flying Nun bands. And like I said, the Chills, the Bats, all those bands. It was sort of, I guess it started being on my radar probably around the time we were doing Out of the Gray.
Right.
I think that scene probably started when our scene started as well, but it wasn't that well known. I'm sure there are people who did know about it, but and I was a pretty avid music fan and a record store, frequenter and radio listener, and I wasn't quite aware of it until little after it started.
Now, the band itself, Dream Syndicate, is together these days and operating. You've been cranking out records, and you have a new one coming out, which I've had a chance to briefly hear, and I know it's coming out later in the year. What's it called? Ultraviolent Battle Hymns and True Confessions.
Got it.
What can you tell me about that?
Well, it's to step back a few paces. We reunited in 2012.
Yep.
Just really, honestly, to play a festival in Spain. There was that none of my other bands could do, so I asked the Dream Syndicate to reunite to play this festival because I wanted to do it, and that led to more tours and more shows and 5 years of hitting the circuit, just kind of reintroducing the band and having a great time. And we around 2017 started thinking, well, if we want to keep doing this, we need new material because we can't just hit the same towns over and over. Well, I guess we could have, but for our sake, we didn't want to, playing the same old songs. So we kind of made ourselves like, we said to ourselves, let's try to make a new record. And two things: if we can't really get new songs to sound the way we want them to, this band is over and this record will never come out. But if we like the record, they'll give us a reason to keep doing this. Well, we did, and we were really happy with the record. How Did I Find Myself Here? And the response was fantastic, and it was really received not as old band puts out new material that we never really want to hear, but we'll pretend to like. It was actually as a new record by a new band, which is what we wanted. And from that point forward, we very quickly made another record, These Times, and another one, The Universe Inside. We put out 3 records in 4 years, a little less than 4 years, and kind of really found a new sound and style for the band that fit in with what we did in the 80s, but had its own personality too. I think we've become more of a psychedelic band than we ever were, more of a free form kind of, bordering on R&B and jazz, and kind of trippy music we would have loved back then. And when you mentioned Papa Was a Rolling Stone as being a surprising choice, in a weird way, that cover and that song and that style of music fits in more with who we are now than it would have back then. Back then, I might have seen a surprising goof. Now it's like, we could have written that song.
Well, there's a tune called Lesson Number One. There's a tune called Lesson Number One that has a kind of jazzy feel, I noticed, to it, just very briefly. So Yeah. And are there horns on the record as well? Hard to Say Goodbye. I think it sounded like there were horns in that.
Yep. Actually, a lot of the songs the record before this one, the Universe Inside, a double album that really is one of my favorite things I've ever done.
Right.
That was a kind of a constructed record built around some jams the band did, and then reconfiguring these freeform jams into adding vocals, lyrics, vocals, horns, a lot of different instruments, and making this kind of, cool psychedelic jazz record, I guess you could say. And on that record we put out, it came out 2 years ago, came out right when the pandemic started, which is not great timing for that record. We didn't get to tour behind it, but one of the key features of that record was this really great sax and trumpet player from the band Butcher Brown, and we brought him back for this record as well.
Cool. I see the leadoff track is called Where I'll Stand. You're doing that live these days, so you're obviously getting ready to present this record.
I'm alive, but I'm falling where the ground split wide. I'm alright, but I'm wondering what's on the other side. I made plans I don't follow. They only let me down. I hate words that ring hollow and shifting shape and sound.
Well, yeah, the funny thing about this record is, we had played our last show in February of 2020, right before the pandemic started, in LA, with the new record coming out, and we were going to, the idea was we would go out and tour the record, which of course a lot of bands had a lot of ideas, and a lot of people and a lot of everybody had ideas that didn't happen. And so we never got to play any shows behind it. We got back together again, I guess it was last July of 2021, to make this new record. And it was pretty much, the songs were mostly written, but we arranged them, recorded them, figured out the kind of record we wanted to make in the studio, and then everybody went their separate ways. It was kind of the first time we'd played together, and was done in, actually together. It was still in the middle of sort of that little break before the Delta variant. So we were starting to kind of do things again, and we said, let's go make a record. Where we're at now is we have to learn how to play it, because we've never played these songs live. And as you said, the one song we have played is Where I'll Stand. We did it one time in Brooklyn, December, but we're gonna be learning the record sometime in the coming months, so we can go out and do it live.
Great. Well, come down to New Zealand again. We really want to. That's high on our list, and our new label Fire Records is really well placed down in Australia and New Zealand. So that's something we want to do. Excellent. That'd be far out. All righty. Well, thank you for talking to me about all this stuff. It's been great to catch up and see you again after 30, 40 years, however long it was.
I guess you're right. I guess
1983.
30 years minus one. Holy cow.
Oh, man.
And this year is the 40th anniversary of our first album, The Days of Wine and Roses. And, I'm sure you feel the same way when you start talking about 40 years. It's like, oh, how did that happen?
Yep. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, there it is. I got a
chunk of years. There it is. There it is. Happy 40th birthday album.
Exactly. Yes, it's amazing. Well, we're all still here. Then that's good. So
we're here. Let's say 40 more.
Absolutely. All righty. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Great talking to you too.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.